Hello and welcome to another video review from AV Forums. I'm Phil Hinton, I'm the editor and I have been since 2003. I'm also a fully trained and qualified THX and ISF calibrator with 16 years of experience. In today's video we're looking at the new 4K top-end LED LCD TV from Sony, the XG95. This review sample is a retail unit supplied by Crampton & Moore. They have kindly loaned us a brand new sealed TV from their retail stock so we can bring you an honest and in-depth appraisal of the model. Just like manufacturer supplied units, Crampton & Moore have no input when it comes to the review and no influence on the results. They loan us the TV to support our unbiased reviews. If you want to help support us and are looking at buying a new TV, all we ask is that you maybe consider Crampton & Moore for your purchase. Their staff are happy to assist you with whatever products you might be interested in. Call Richard on 01302 365 760 or email richard.jones@cramptonandmoore.co.uk and mention AV Forums. So let's jump straight into the review of the Sony XG95 and look at the design first. The XG95 or X950G, depending on your location, is a traditionally designed LED LCD set that has a very nice level of build quality which you would expect from a Sony product. Most of the materials are metal, and once the stands are attached, everything feels solid and sturdy. The screen surface is really quite reflective, as you can see here in a side-by-side with a Samsung Q70R on the right and the XG95 on the left. So make sure that you consider your positioning carefully if using the Sony in a bright room. The feet are designed to sit outwards, and unlike the XF90 we reviewed last year and which remains in the Sony range for 2019, you can't position them inwards for smaller mounting surfaces. This means that you have to have a TV stand wide enough to fit the XG95's feet when positioned outwards. This obviously varies depending on the screen size. The reason the feet point outwards is the fact that a soundbar has been designed to fit between these feet with the same angles for the sides of the soundbar. The feet can only fit into their designated slots on the rear of the TV and are attached with 2 screws each. Once attached, they are sturdy and support the TV as you would expect. As with a lot of Sony TVs recently, there is ample cable management on offer to hide your source and power cables, and this is available within the feet to give you that clean look. On the lower part of the screen bezel is a tiny silver strip, and the rest of the bezel around the TV is a dark brushed metal finish with a minimalist design. In the middle of the bottom edge of the panel is a Sony logo, and underneath this is an LED light that you can switch off or have display in different ways within the menus. To the top left of the screen is a very faint and small BRAVIA logo, and because this is a brand new retail sample which has to go back, we did leave the protective coverings around the bezels. These would obviously be taken off if it was your TV. The rear of the XG95 is also well put together, with mounted high frequency drivers in a tube that extends the length of the chassis about 3/4 of the way up the back panel. This is part of the acoustic multi-audio system, and there's a BRAVIA logo on the left hand side of the back panel on the tube. Directly above this are air vents for cooling from the panel, and in the centre of the back plate are the VESA mounting points if you're going to wall mount the Sony. To the bottom left is the hardwired power cable, and to the right are the downwards and sideways facing connections. The connections on the XG95 are positioned to the side as well as downwards facing on the rear right of the panel. Looking at the sideways facing connections first, we have a common interface slot, AV in and headphone out 3.5mm jacks, as well as 2 USB slots and the first of 4 HDMI slots. Downwards facing we have a further USB port and 3 HDMI inputs. The HDMI slots are all full bandwidth 18GB per second HDMI 2.0B ports, and they support 4K 444 60p video signals along with HDR10 HLG and Dolby Vision HDR formats. HDMI input 3 has eARC as well as normal ARC compatibility. We also have a digital optical out, Ethernet and 2 satellite and 1 terrestrial antenna. One of our main criticisms of recent Sony TV models has been the remote control, which was made from cheap plastic with small rubberized buttons, and that really didn't match the premium feel of the TVs in question that they controlled. Thankfully, Sony has listened to that feedback from reviewers and owners, and the XG95 comes with a newly designed and premium feeling remote control. The rear of the remote is made from a soft touch plastic and the front face has a brushed metal finish. The buttons are nicely laid out in a logical manner and the whole item has a nice weight and it fits neatly in the hand. Power and numerical keys dominate the top of the remote, followed by two large and dominant instant access keys for Google Play Store and Netflix. Below these are coloured keys and EPG access buttons along with a microphone and source key. To the right of these is the settings key for direct access to the settings menus. The directional keys enter and back, TV and home are likely to be the most used of all the buttons on the remote, and as such they are centrally located in easy thumb reach when in the hand. Rounding off the buttons are the channel and volume rockers and play controls. Overall, the new remote is well designed and a vast improvement on the previous TV controllers, but if we were to complain, it would be for Sony to add a backlight. The XG95 is an Android TV and runs the latest audio version of the software. Sony TVs have in the past been victim of crashing, slow reaction times and lag due to the software and processing power required, but we found the Master Series ZF9 and ZF9 last year running audio to be a real step up in the right direction. With the XG95, sadly we did have a few issues which resulted in 2 full crashes and an issue with Wi-Fi not staying connected, which we could not resolve. For the majority of our use, and once hardwired to the internet, the audio system reacted as we would expect, and it competes with other manufacturers' systems out there, plus we have most of the major apps and catch-up services available. Of course, you can get around all the Android drawbacks by using an external media box. We enter the settings via a direct button on the remote control and have a listing that is an Android design. Clicking the display and sound, we select the picture settings and have a number of picture modes to choose from. The best settings for watching an accurate image are cinema for a bright room and custom for darker viewing conditions. On the front page of the picture menu, you need to switch off the auto picture mode and light sensor, and next we go to the advanced menu. Within the advanced menu, we have selections for brightness, colour, clarity, motion and video options along with the reset button. Within the brightness section, we have brightness, which is the backlight setting. We then have the traditional contrast and gamma settings along with what Sony call black level, which is named brightness on other TV models. Under these we have black adjust, advanced contrast enhancer, auto local dimming and extended dynamic range. The colour menu has the colour and hue settings, which should be left as default. Colour temperature at Expert 1 is the most accurate for grayscale, and the advanced colour temperature is the calibration adjustment for 2-point and 10-point adjustments. But if you use the Calman for BRAVIA app, this extends to 20 points and adds 2 new picture modes. Live colour can be left in the off position, and per colour adjustment is the Sony Colour Management System or CMS, and allows adjustment of primary and secondary colour points for hue, saturation and luminance. Moving to clarity, and we have the sharpness and reality creation settings. We found leaving sharpness at the default and switching off reality creation gave us the most accurate image. Random noise reduction and digital noise reduction are also left off, but if you do have to watch poor compressed sources, you may find the lower settings work to improve things slightly. With high quality sources you don't need to use them, but smooth gradation set to low works very well with most content to remove slight instances of colour stepping and gradation. Motion houses the motion flow and film mode settings, and Sony has been a brand that has some of the best motion on their TVs and displays. However, the last few Master Series TVs and the XG95 using the X1 Ultimate chip has removed some of the picture processing options, noticeably for cadence detection and interlaced sources such as TV tuners and set-top boxes. The default auto setting may display news channel ticker tapes with a little bit of judder and skipping, but you only have 2 options here, which is auto and off, so those are your choices to play with. We did notice that with external set-top boxes there were more jaggies visible with the XG95 than when compared with the Q70R, but with the built-in UView tuner it was clear and crisp, so it only affects external sources. Motion flow is easy to use and experiment with, and 24 frames per second material is displayed correctly when it's switched off or at the minimum where there's no interpolation. Clearness adds in black frame insertion and the screen gets darker with each step upwards. We personally found it's best switched off, but you're free to experiment with motion flow that can be very useful for fast moving sports content without adding in too many artifacts, and Sony is lighter on the soap opera effect compared to rivals. Video options is next, and leaving all three options on auto will take care of these settings for you, and that wraps up the picture menus. The Sony XG95 sits above the continuing XF90 in the higher Sony LED LCD TV range, with the Master Series ZF9 being discontinued. The XG95 uses the same X1 Ultimate chipset that the Master Series sets use, but the 55 and 65 inch XG95 models do not have the X wide angle technology that is reserved for 75 inches and above, which means the contrast performance is strong when viewing directly, but does suffer once you get off axis with the 55 and 65 inch XG95. It uses a full array local dimming setup behind a VA LCD panel with Sony's proprietary local dimming algorithm. This attempts to keep deep blacks and suppress blooming using just the dimming zones, and we'll come back to this in the performance section. For professional calibrators, there's the Kalman and BRAVIA app, which allows direct access to the XG95 for calibration and also adds two new picture modes for day and night settings. Sound-wise, the XG95 sees the introduction of tweeters placed 3/4 of the way up the back panel and angled to shine directly out of the sides of the panel, giving the sound a wider soundstage, with the mid and bass drivers pointing downwards at the bottom of the panel. This is supposed to try and mimic the acoustic surface sound available on the OLED screens, but doesn't obviously vibrate the panel in any way. The TV tuner section of the XG95 is a full-on UView platform with all the terrestrial catch-up services, and we really like the way the tuner works. It's easy to skip through channels without having to bring up the full EPG. Pressing the home key also loads up the Android Audio platform, which for the most part worked as it should, but is prone to crashing or slowing down to a crawl at times. We also had issues with this retail set's Wi-Fi connection dropping after a few hours use and requiring a full restart of the system to get it working again. We had to eventually resort to a hardwired Ethernet connection in the end for stability issues. Using the custom picture mode and expert one for the colour temperature setting, the out-of-the-box measurements looked reasonably accurate. Remembering that this is a brand new retail unit supplied by a retailer, this should bode well for customers buying the same type of TV, getting the same reasonable results. The out-of-the-box grayscale is fairly good, with a lack of red energy as the image gets brighter, and a cyan blue tint is visible with on-screen content. Gamma tracks well at BT 1886, and our Delta E errors are also reasonable, with just higher than 3 in the mid to bright sections of the image, as we can see the cyan blue tint. The colour gamut is also decent, but it does have a pull towards cyan thanks to the white point and slight undersaturation of red at 25, 50 and 75% saturation points. Otherwise, everything is there or thereabout when it comes to the tracking points for saturation, and on correcting the white point we expect them to fall into place. Using the calibration controls available within the menu system, we set about correcting the grayscale and colour gamut for SDR content. We were quickly able to correct the grayscale and gamma tracking to a reference level, with Delta E errors all well under 1, so invisible to the eye. There was also no longer any tint to the content on screen. Following this, the colour gamut also fell into place with just a few small tweaks using the CMS system to get the SDR colour points perfect. We double checked this against a full multi-point sweep of the grayscale with Delta E errors averaging 0.3, which is reference level, as well as a multi-point colour checker for the Rec 709 measurements, and again we have a reference level result following calibration. Moving to the HDR performance, and we first of all checked the XG95 with 1000 nit and 4000 nit metadata signals to see how the tone mapping was applied. It was clear that the Sony ignores any metadata in static HDR10 signals, and it tone maps the same for each. Looking at the PQ EOTF, we can see that it tracks these standard curves in yellow as expected, and then hard clips at around 1100 nits, which is close to its peak brightness. This means that for 1000 nit mastered material there is minimal tone mapping and slight clipping of brighter highlights to retain the consistent APL of the scene. This does mean that specular highlight details are also clipped with higher nit mastered material as the set hard clips. However, the image trade-off is more accurate shadows and midtones, which our eyes are more sensitive to seeing differences within. As we can see in the peak brightness versus window size chart, the XG95 has a peak brightness in calibrated mode of 1121 nits for a 10% window and 655 nits full field, which is very good for an LCD TV with little in the way of ABL intrusion. There is a slight drop for 1%, 2% and 5%, which the dynamic tone mapping will do to prevent over-the-top blooming with such small areas of the screen. In terms of wider colour gamut support, the XG95 manages to track well to the P3 saturation point, but it can't quite reach the full gamut size with a lack of absolute gamut coverage. We measured the coverage as 88% XY and 93% UV, which is a little short of where we would ideally like the gamut to be, and BT 2020 results were also a little low as a result. However, this is not the major stumbling block for the XG95 when it comes to HDR content playback, which we're about to cover in the next section of the review. Jumping straight into the picture performance, and we were impressed with the Sony XG95 when it comes to upscaling HD content and interlaced TV signals from the built-in tuner. We did find some issues of jaggies with outboard set-top box signals being fed into the TV, but this wasn't the case with the UView tuner on board. We also thought that the panel uniformity was also very good with little signs of DSE or panel banding, but there were darker corners on uniform patterns due to the lack of dimming zones. You also have to bear in mind that with LCD panels there is a bit of a panel lottery, and your results may vary quite a bit from the results that we've had. Obviously this is a retail set, so we're more prepared to say that this is probably a little bit more consistent with what you can buy in the stores. With SDR content, the XG95 was extremely accurate when in comparison with a Samsung Q70R, which also performed extremely well with the same content. Video processing wise, we found the Sony to have the slightly better motion, but we also felt that some of the processing cutbacks recently with the X1 Ultimate chip did have a slightly negative impact on some content with the XG95. With full frame SDR content, the Sony was excellent, and even with scope films with black bars, it handled the content extremely well, with the local dimming working much better with tricky dark scenes like Gravity in comparison to the Samsung Q70R. However, we did find some issues with HDR content and black bars that looked the same as it did with the ZF9 TV that we tested back in December. Because of the lack of dimming zones, we do get more instances of blooming on the XG95, and as you can see here with the main titles of Alien, it extends into what should be black bars. The Samsung handles this without any issues when side by side. And it's not just with static brightness images like the titles. Even within movies, if you have a bright object next to the black bars, they light up. And in my case, take me completely out of the movie in question, as it is just so distracting. No amount of bias lighting is going to cover up flaws like this in a dark room, and it really did create issues with the vast majority of content I watched on the XG95, and I simply cannot recommend this set for movie fans who will be watching lots of HDR scope content in dark rooms. If you're watching TV series and 16:9 HDR content, you'll have no issues at all, but with scope content with the black bars, you'll probably find it as distracting as I did. Subtitles are no better, with lots of blooming and even whole image brightness shifts from the local dimming getting in the way. This really is a shame, as colour reproduction with HDR content is good, and when it behaves, the XG95 outperforms the Q70R in this respect, with better balanced and nuanced colour reproduction against the slightly oversaturated Samsung look. It's a real shame that the lack of dimming zones with HDR content makes movie watching so distracting, with the black bars lighting up. Otherwise, the XG95 has a really nice cinematic edge with good skin tones and excellent natural colours, and it's decent enough shadow detail. It's also far more dynamic and brighter than the Samsung Q70R in a direct comparison, which makes the issues of light pollution in the black bars even more annoying. The XG95 could have been so much better with just a little more care taken in its engineering. You can get around some of the issues with the black bars by watching it in a bright room, but there's not many movie fans out there who'd want to do that. SDR content is the XG95's strong point, with less obvious light leakage and superb colour reproduction, making images look natural and lifelike. Dolby Vision content is also decent, but there is still some issues with posterization in the shadows and blacks of certain content, and the image is still a little too dark in the cinema mode, and bright mode is still noisy in the blacks. The Netflix calibrated mode also mimics the custom in cinema settings to provide decent image quality. There really is much to like about the Sony XG95, with good build quality and a strong design standing out on first look. The new remote control is superb, with an intuitive design and layout that gives the TV a higher quality feeling compared to the old plastic and rubber affair. The feet are wide apart, so you'll need to have a suitably wide TV rack, and they can't be reversed like the XF90 feet can, so bear that in mind. Cable management is also good, and the connections are well laid out and plentiful to the rear. The audio smart TV system is a step up on previous non-Master Series TVs, but things still can crash, and we had issues with our Wi-Fi connection. But the UV tuner and all the major catch-up services and major streaming apps are here to enjoy. The XG95 is fairly accurate in the custom picture mode out of the box for picture quality, and it can be calibrated manually or by a professional using the CalMan for BRAVIA interface to achieve reference quality results. We certainly managed that with this retail set, and using just the front facing controls, HDR performance is also decent in terms of peak brightness and colour reproduction, but the major letdown, for us anyway, is the light leakage into the black bars of movies in HDR mode, something that shouldn't happen at all. Dolby Vision content for the majority of the time also looks decent, but it can sometimes look a little bit too dark compared to an off-board Dolby source or the HDR10 version, with some black posterization still an issue. The XG95 really shines with SDR content and streaming viewing without HDR. Here we have natural, accurate colour reproduction with good blacks and decent shadow detail, and motion is also a strong point for the most part, but with interlaced content, especially from an external source, the XG95 is not quite as good as previous non-X1 Ultimate chips TVs. There are also no obvious signs of dirty screen effect or panel banning, spoiling sports or other similar content in SDR modes, and colours are again the strong point with this content. The FA Cup final on BBC iPlayer in UHD HLG also looks superb with great colours and excellent detail. If Sony could fix the black bar issues with HDR content, we would be handing out a highly recommended badge right now, but sadly the issue was so distracting on this retail source set that it just pulled us out of movies we're trying to watch, and it became a major distraction. No amount of bias lighting in a dark room could fix the issue, which is down to poor engineering of the backlight. As such, this really dents the score we can give the XG95, which otherwise is a strong TV with excellent SDR picture accuracy, good gaming features, and with 16:9 full screen content, also has decent HDR. If you're only going to watch content that is 16:9 ratio in HDR and use an off-board smart TV system, you might find the XG95 to be the excellent TV that you're looking for. But for us, as movie fans and viewers, we can't get past the issues that most reviews seem to strangely have skipped, and that's the light pollution of the black bars in HDR movies. We just hope that Sony takes the feedback as it's intended and does something to improve the performance of its LED LCD TV. Sadly, the XG95 fails to win a badge at this stage, but we hope Sony will look at adding improvements for movie viewers. If you'd like to see more videos like this, then please like and subscribe, and why not click the notification bell to find out when our next review is available.